A narcissist often views conflict differently than healthy people do. While you're trying to resolve an issue, they're often trying to maintain control. While you're seeking understanding, they're focused on protecting their ego. And while you're hoping for a productive conversation, they may be looking for another opportunity to pull you into a cycle of frustration and emotional exhaustion. One of the most important truths to understand when dealing with a narcissist is that they are constantly testing boundaries. Most people assume disrespect happens because the narcissist is unaware of the impact of their behavior, but that's often not the case. What frequently happens is that they are paying close attention to what they can get away with. They watch reactions, they observe responses, they notice what behavior is challenged and what behavior is tolerated. Every interaction becomes a source of information that helps them determine how much influence, control, or power they can maintain within the relationship. Boundary testing rarely starts with something obvious. It often begins with small actions that seem insignificant when viewed individually: a sarcastic comment, a broken promise, a dismissive remark, a subtle insult disguised as a joke, an interruption when you're speaking, a tendency to ignore your preferences while expecting you to accommodate theirs. These moments may appear minor, but they serve a purpose. They allow the narcissist to measure your response and evaluate whether there will be consequences for crossing the line. This process is similar to someone checking whether a door is locked. If they push against it and it opens easily, they learn that access requires little effort. In the same way, when a narcissist pushes a boundary and encounters no resistance, they receive a message that the behavior is acceptable. The issue isn't necessarily the specific action itself. The issue is the lesson that follows. The lesson becomes, I can do this and nothing will happen. Many people unknowingly reinforce this pattern because they value peace. They dislike conflict. They want to believe the other person had good intentions. They tell themselves that it's not worth making an issue out of a small incident. They hope that kindness, patience, and understanding will naturally inspire better behavior. While these qualities are admirable, they can become harmful when they are repeatedly offered to someone who interprets tolerance as permission. A narcissist often sees boundaries differently than emotionally healthy people do. Healthy individuals generally recognize boundaries as expressions of mutual respect. They understand that limits help maintain trust, safety, and dignity within relationships. A narcissist, however, may view boundaries as challenges. Instead of seeing them as reasonable expectations, they may see them as obstacles standing between them and what they want. This difference in perspective explains why boundary violations can become so frequent and persistent. The testing may become more aggressive over time. What begins as occasional disrespect can evolve into manipulation, guilt-tripping, criticism, blame-shifting, or emotional intimidation. This escalation doesn't happen overnight. It happens gradually because each successful boundary violation creates confidence. The narcissist learns that the behavior works. They learn that they can pressure, persuade, or exhaust someone into giving up their position. As a result, the line keeps moving further and further until the relationship becomes increasingly unbalanced. One of the reasons boundary testing is so effective is that it creates confusion. The narcissist may alternate between kindness and disrespect, making it difficult to identify the pattern. One day they are charming and supportive. The next day, they are dismissive and critical. This inconsistency causes people to focus on the positive moments while minimizing the negative ones. They begin questioning their own perceptions. They wonder if they are overreacting. They second-guess their instincts. Meanwhile, the boundary violations continue. Another important aspect of boundary testing is that narcissists often pay more attention to actions than words. Someone may explain their feelings repeatedly. They may express disappointment, frustration, or hurt. They may clearly communicate what behavior is unacceptable. But if those words are not supported by action, the narcissist learns that the boundary is negotiable. They hear the complaint, but they focus on the outcome. If nothing changes, they conclude that the limit isn't real. This is why consistency matters so much. Boundaries are not established through explanations alone. They are established through repeated action. Every time a person follows through on a consequence, they reinforce the message that the boundary exists. Every time they fail to follow through, they weaken that message. The narcissist notices these patterns carefully because they reveal where the true limits are. People often fear that enforcing boundaries will make them appear harsh, selfish, or unreasonable. In reality, healthy boundaries are acts of self-respect. They communicate that your needs matter, your feelings matter, and your dignity matters. They do not require aggression. They do not require lengthy arguments. They simply require clarity and consistency. A person who values themselves understands that protecting their emotional well-being is not an act of cruelty, it is an act of responsibility. What makes boundary testing particularly dangerous is that it can slowly reshape a person's sense of normal. Behaviors that once seemed unacceptable begin to feel familiar, disrespect becomes routine, emotional exhaustion becomes expected, walking on eggshells becomes part of daily life. The longer this continues, the harder it becomes to recognize how much has been compromised. This is why early awareness is so important. Recognizing boundary testing for what it is allows people to address it before it becomes deeply entrenched. At its core, boundary testing is not about misunderstanding. It is about discovering limits. The narcissist is constantly gathering information about what will be tolerated, excused, ignored, or forgiven. Every response provides data. Every reaction teaches a lesson. The question is never simply what they are doing. The deeper question is what they are learning from your response. When a person understands this dynamic, they stop focusing solely on changing the narcissist's behavior and start focusing on strengthening their own boundaries, because the most powerful message a narcissist can receive is not delivered through words. It is delivered through consistent actions that demonstrate exactly where respect ends and consequences begin. Respect comes from clarity, not from endless explanations. This is one of the most important lessons a person can learn when dealing with a narcissist. Many people believe that if they can just find the right words, the right tone, or the perfect explanation, the narcissist will finally understand their perspective and begin treating them differently. They spend countless hours trying to communicate their feelings, justify their needs, and explain why certain behaviors are hurtful. Yet, despite all these efforts, the same problems continue to appear. The reason is that respect is rarely created through repeated explanations. Respect is created through clear communication combined with clear boundaries. Clarity is powerful because it removes confusion. It leaves little room for manipulation, misunderstanding, or negotiation. When a person communicates clearly, they express what they think, what they feel, what they expect, and what they will or will not accept. They do so without excessive justification, emotional pleading, or lengthy defenses. Their message is direct and understandable. A narcissist may not agree with it, but they cannot easily pretend they don't understand it. Many people struggle with clarity because they fear conflict. They worry that being direct will seem rude, selfish, or confrontational. As a result, they soften their message so much that the actual meaning becomes unclear. Instead of saying, "That behavior is unacceptable to me," they say, "I was kind of hoping things might be different." Instead of saying, "I won't participate in conversations where I'm being insulted," they say, "I wish you would be a little nicer." These softer statements may feel safer, but they often fail to communicate a firm boundary. They leave room for interpretation, debate, and dismissal. A narcissist often thrives in environments where communication is unclear. Ambiguity creates opportunities to shift conversations, deny responsibility, and redirect attention. When expectations are vague, it becomes easier to argue about what was meant rather than address what actually happened. This is why clarity becomes such an important tool. It removes unnecessary complexity and focuses attention on the issue itself. Consider what happens when someone repeatedly explains why they are hurt. They may provide examples, share emotions, describe past experiences, and carefully outline the impact of the narcissist's behavior. While this level of explanation may seem reasonable, it can sometimes create a different problem. The conversation becomes centered on proving that the hurt exists rather than addressing the behavior that caused it. The narcissist may challenge the details, question the emotions, or argue about the interpretation. Instead of moving toward a solution, the discussion becomes a debate. Clarity shifts the focus. Rather than spending energy convincing someone that a behavior is harmful, a clear communicator identifies the behavior and states the boundary. The emphasis moves away from persuasion and toward decision-making. The conversation is no longer about whether the narcissist agrees with the boundary. The conversation is about whether the boundary will be respected. This distinction is extremely important because respect cannot be negotiated into existence. A person cannot force another individual to value their feelings, acknowledge their perspective, or behave with maturity. What they can do is clearly communicate their standards and determine how they will respond if those standards are violated. This is where true personal power begins to emerge. Clarity also strengthens self-respect. Every time a person clearly communicates their needs, they send a message to themselves that those needs matter. They stop treating their feelings as optional. They stop acting as though their concerns require approval before they become valid. Instead, they recognize that their experiences are real and deserving of acknowledgement. This internal shift often changes the entire dynamic of a relationship. Narcissists frequently rely on confusion to maintain control. They may give mixed messages, change positions, deny previous statements, or create uncertainty about what is actually happening. This confusion can leave others feeling emotionally exhausted and mentally overwhelmed. When someone responds with clarity, they refuse to participate in that confusion. They bring the conversation back to simple, observable facts and clear expectations. Another reason clarity is so effective is that it reduces emotional vulnerability during difficult conversations. Long explanations often expose emotional pressure points. The more information a narcissist receives about fears, insecurities, and emotional struggles, the more opportunities they may have to dismiss, minimize, or exploit those vulnerabilities. Clear communication protects against this by focusing on the issue rather than providing endless personal details. This does not mean becoming cold, detached, or uncaring. It simply means recognizing that not every situation requires a detailed defense. Sometimes a simple statement is enough. Sometimes no is enough. Sometimes that doesn't work for me is enough. Sometimes I disagree is enough. Healthy communication does not require a person to earn the right to have boundaries through elaborate explanations. Many individuals raised in difficult environments develop the habit of over-explaining. They become accustomed to defending every decision, justifying every preference, and proving every feeling. This habit often follows them into adulthood. When dealing with a narcissist, however, over-explaining can become a trap. The conversation never ends because each explanation creates another point for debate. The more evidence presented, the more opportunities arise for distraction and argument. Clarity breaks this cycle. It shortens conversations that would otherwise become endless. It establishes firm expectations without inviting unnecessary negotiation. It communicates confidence, certainty, and self-respect. Most importantly, it helps a person remain focused on what truly matters rather than becoming lost in emotional battles that lead nowhere. People often underestimate how much confidence is reflected through clear communication. A person who speaks clearly demonstrates trust in their own judgment. They do not need universal agreement before standing by their decisions. They understand that disagreement does not invalidate their perspective. This confidence often changes how others respond to them because clarity signals that manipulation, confusion, and pressure are unlikely to succeed. The goal of clarity is not to force understanding, win arguments, or gain approval. The goal is to communicate truthfully and directly while maintaining personal integrity. It is about saying what needs to be said without becoming trapped in endless attempts to justify it. When a person embraces clarity, they stop chasing validation and start honoring their own standards. They stop trying to convince others to respect them and begin acting in ways that reflect self-respect. That shift alone can transform the way they navigate difficult relationships, because clear communication establishes something that every healthy relationship requires: a firm understanding of where one person ends and another begins. Confidence over conflict is one of the most powerful principles a person can adopt when dealing with a narcissist. Many people enter these interactions believing they must defend themselves, prove their point, correct misunderstandings, or win arguments in order to gain respect. They assume that if they can just explain things clearly enough, provide enough evidence, or expose the flaws in the narcissist's behavior, the situation will improve. Unfortunately, this approach often leads to greater frustration because narcissistic individuals tend to thrive in conflict. They are frequently more interested in maintaining control, protecting their image, or asserting dominance than they are in reaching mutual understanding. This is why confidence is far more effective than confrontation. Conflict focuses attention on the other person. Confidence focuses attention on yourself. Conflict asks, how can I make them understand? Confidence asks, what am I willing to accept? Conflict tries to change another person's behavior through argument. Confidence changes your own behavior through self-respect and clear choices. This distinction may seem small, but it completely transforms the dynamic of a difficult relationship. When people feel attacked, criticized, or disrespected, their natural instinct is often to defend themselves. They want to correct false accusations. They want to explain their intentions. They want to prove that they are not the person the narcissist claims they are. While these reactions are understandable, they often create exactly the situation the narcissist wants. The conversation becomes centered on defending against accusations rather than addressing inappropriate behavior. Hours can be spent debating details while the original issue remains unresolved. A confident person recognizes that not every accusation deserves a response. Not every criticism requires a defense. Not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. This doesn't mean ignoring reality or allowing lies to stand uncontested in every circumstance. It means understanding that some arguments are designed to trap you in an endless cycle of explanation and justification. The more energy you invest in defending yourself, the more control the narcissist gains over your emotional state. Confidence allows a person to step outside that cycle. Instead of reacting immediately, they evaluate whether the conversation is productive. They ask themselves whether the discussion is leading toward resolution or simply creating more confusion. If the interaction serves no constructive purpose, they feel no obligation to continue participating. Their self-worth is not dependent upon convincing someone else to agree with them. One reason confidence is so effective is that it removes the emotional fuel that often drives narcissistic interactions. Many narcissists seek emotional reactions because reactions provide a sense of influence. Anger, frustration, tears, desperation, and defensiveness all signal that they have successfully affected someone's emotional state. When a person responds with calm confidence instead of emotional escalation, the interaction changes. The usual patterns become less effective because the expected reaction never arrives. This does not mean becoming emotionally numb. It does not mean suppressing feelings or pretending not to care. It means learning to manage emotions rather than allowing emotions to dictate behavior. A confident person may feel hurt, disappointed, or frustrated, but those feelings do not automatically determine their actions. They pause, they think. They choose their response deliberately rather than reacting impulsively. Many people mistakenly believe confidence means being aggressive. They imagine confidence as speaking louder, arguing harder, or dominating conversations. True confidence often looks very different. It can be quiet. It can be calm. It can be measured. A confident individual does not need to overpower others because they are not trying to prove their worth. Their sense of value comes from within rather than from external validation. This internal security becomes especially important when dealing with a narcissist because narcissists often attack self-esteem. They may criticize, belittle, compare, dismiss, or undermine others in order to elevate themselves. If a person's confidence depends entirely on outside approval, these tactics can be extremely damaging. Every insult feels like a threat. Every criticism feels like evidence of failure. Every disagreement feels like rejection. Confidence changes this experience. A confident person understands that another individual's opinion does not define their identity. They may consider feedback when it is constructive, but they do not automatically accept every negative judgment as truth. They recognize that criticism often reveals more about the speaker than the target. This perspective makes manipulation far less effective because the narcissist loses access to one of their most powerful tools, the ability to control someone's self-perception. Confidence also helps people make decisions based on principles rather than fear. Fear often keeps individuals trapped in unhealthy dynamics. They fear conflict, rejection, abandonment, criticism, or retaliation. As a result, they tolerate behaviors that violate their values. They remain silent when they should speak. They stay when they should leave. They compromise their well-being in order to avoid temporary discomfort. A confident person still experiences fear, but they refuse to let fear become the primary decision maker. They understand that avoiding conflict at all costs often creates larger problems in the future. They recognize that protecting their peace sometimes requires difficult choices. They are willing to experience temporary discomfort in order to maintain long-term self-respect. One of the most powerful aspects of confidence is that it shifts focus away from controlling others. People often become exhausted trying to change narcissists. They analyze every conversation, search for the perfect response, and hope each new approach will finally create understanding. This effort consumes enormous amounts of emotional energy because it is directed toward something they cannot control. Confidence redirects that energy toward personal choices, personal growth, and personal boundaries. rather than asking, how do I get them to stop? Confidence asks, what will I do if they continue? Rather than asking, how can I make them respect me? Confidence asks, how can I respect myself? These questions lead to solutions that are within a person's control rather than dependent on someone else's behavior. The more confident a person becomes, the less appealing unnecessary conflict appears. They stop viewing every disagreement as a battle to be won. They stop measuring success by whether someone else changes their mind. They recognize that peace often comes from choosing not to engage in conversations that have no productive outcome. Their energy becomes a valuable resource that they protect rather than freely giving away. Confidence over conflict is ultimately about understanding where real power exists. Real power is not found in winning arguments, delivering perfect comebacks, or forcing others to admit they are wrong. Real power is found in emotional stability, clear boundaries, self-respect, and the ability to remain grounded even when someone else is trying to provoke a reaction. A person who possesses that kind of confidence no longer needs conflict to prove their strength because their strength is already evident in the way they carry themselves, the standards they maintain, and the peace they refuse to surrender.